When Rebecca Torres's wealthy in-laws handed her the deed to a dilapidated mountain cabin for $1 at the family estate reading, their mocking laughter echoed through the lawyer's office. But hidden beneath the rotting floorboards of that forgotten property lay a collection that would not only make Rebecca a millionaire, but expose a decades-long art theft conspiracy that had robbed an entire community of its cultural heritage. Pause for engagement. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you love stories about underdogs who triumph against all odds, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, I've got something even more unbelievable lined up for you. The conference room at Whitmore Associates law firm smelled of expensive leather and old money. Rebecca Torres sat rigidly in her chair, wedged between her ex-husband's family members who occupied the mahogany table like they owned it, which, given their wealth, they basically did. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown Portland stretched beneath a gray October sky, but inside this temperature-controlled fortress, the atmosphere was even colder. It was October 15, 2023, and they were gathered for the reading of Vivian Ashford's will. The family matriarch had passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 96, leaving behind a fortune estimated at $18 million, accumulated through 3 generations of timber industry dominance in the Pacific Northwest. Rebecca was 34 years old, though she felt decades older. She worked as a pediatric physical therapist at Mercy Children's Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts 4 days a week while raising her 7-year-old daughter Lily as a single mother. Her marriage to Christopher Ashford had lasted 4 years before imploding under the weight of his family's constant interference, his mother's poisonous criticisms, and ultimately his infidelity with a woman from what his family called appropriate social circles. The divorce had been brutal. The Ashford family's legal team, one of the most expensive in the state, had systematically dismantled every claim Rebecca made. She'd walked away with minimal child support and a custody arrangement that gave Christopher generous visitation rights he rarely bothered to exercise. The message had been clear: you were never really one of us, and now you never will be. Rebecca hadn't wanted to attend today's reading. She'd received the certified letter from attorney Daniel Whitmore requiring her presence, and her first instinct had been to ignore it. The Ashfords had made their position crystal clear: she was an outsider, a mistake, someone Christopher had foolishly married during what his mother called his rebellious phase. But the letter had been insistent, almost urgent. Your presence is legally required as you are named as a beneficiary in Mrs. Vivian Ashford's last will and testament. Failure to appear may result in forfeiture of said bequest. So here she sat, in a charcoal blazer she'd bought at a thrift store specifically for this occasion, surrounded by people wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. Christopher sat across from her, his new wife Ainsley beside him. Ainsley wore a black Chanel suit in pearls, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, which she had, actually, having modeled briefly before marrying into money. Christopher's mother, Victoria Ashford, sat at the head of the table in the power position, her silver hair styled in waves that probably required weekly salon appointments. She wore all black, though Rebecca suspected the outfit had nothing to do with mourning and everything to do with making a statement about dominance. Christopher's younger brother Marcus lounged in his chair with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been denied anything in his life. His wife Simone checked her phone periodically, clearly bored by the proceedings. And then there was Christopher's sister, Charlotte, who at least had the decency to offer Rebecca a small, sympathetic smile when she'd first entered the room. Charlotte had always been the kindest of the Ashfords, though even she had ultimately sided with family over justice during the divorce. Attorney Daniel Whitmore sat at the opposite end of the table from Victoria, a folder thick with documents before him. He was in his 60s, gray-haired and distinguished, with the kind of precise mannerisms that came from decades of handling delicate family matters for the wealthy. "Thank you all for being here," Whitmore began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "I know this is a difficult time, and I appreciate your patience as we work through Vivian's final wishes." Victoria made a small sound of impatience. "Can we please proceed, Daniel? Some of us have appointments." Whitmore's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Victoria." He opened the folder and began reading the standard legal language that opened all wills, sound mind, disposing of property, revoking all previous wills. Rebecca's attention drifted. She was calculating whether she could afford to replace Lily's winter coat this year or if they'd have to make last year's still work, even though Lily had grown at least 3 inches. To my son Charles, deceased, whose memory I carry always, I leave my prayers that he has found peace. Rebecca's attention snapped back. Charles Ashford, Christopher's father, had died in a car accident when Christopher was 15. It was the one tragedy that had humanized the Ashfords in Rebecca's eyes, the one crack in their perfect, controlled facade. To my grandson Christopher Ashford, Whitmore continued, I leave my collection of first edition books and the contents of my study at Ashford Manor, as he has always appreciated literature. Christopher nodded, pleased. Those books were probably worth 6 figures. To my grandson Marcus Ashford, I leave my shares in Ashford Timber Industries, representing 15% of the company. Marcus actually sat up straighter. 15% of a multi-million-dollar timber company, that was real money, even for an Ashford. To my granddaughter Charlotte Ashford Morrison, I leave my jewelry collection, my winter home in Scottsdale, and the sum of $500,000 in trust for her children's education. Charlotte's eyes widened. The jewelry alone was probably worth $250,000. To my daughter-in-law Victoria Ashford, I leave the Ashford Manor estate and all its contents, with the exception of those items specifically bequeathed to others. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but Rebecca saw the satisfaction in her eyes. The manor was worth at least $4 million. Whitmore paused and took a sip of water. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca felt her palms sweating. Why was she here? What could Vivian possibly have left her? In truth, Vivian had been the only Ashford who'd treated Rebecca with consistent kindness. During the marriage, when Victoria's criticisms had cut deepest, your table manners need work, dear, that dress is a bit too casual for an Ashford function, did you really think getting pregnant would secure your position in this family? Vivian had been a quiet ally. The old woman had attended Lily's birth, arriving with hand-knitted blankets and genuine warmth. She'd taken Rebecca aside at family gatherings and asked about her work, her dreams, her life beyond being Mrs. Christopher Ashford. When the divorce had decimated Rebecca financially, Vivian had quietly slipped her a check for $5,000 with a note that said simply, for Lily's future. Don't let them know. Rebecca had cried over that check, depositing it into a savings account she'd never touched, keeping it as an emergency fund that had saved her more than once when unexpected expenses threatened to drown her. And finally, Whitmore said, his voice taking on a different quality, was that hesitation? Discomfort? To my former granddaughter-in-law, Rebecca Torres. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rebecca felt every eye turn toward her. Who showed more grace, dignity, and genuine character than any member of my family during her time with us, and who has continued to embody those qualities despite how she was treated. Oh, for God's sake, Victoria muttered. I leave the property known as Pinecrest Cabin, located on Forest Service Road 247 in the Cascade Range, along with all structures and contents therein, and the 3.2 acres of land on which it sits, for the sum of $1, should she choose to accept this bequest. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Marcus started laughing. It started as a chuckle but quickly built into full-throated laughter that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. $1, he managed between guffaws. Grandmother left her the old hunting cabin for $1. Christopher joined in, his laugh cruel and familiar. Oh my God, Rebecca, that place is a complete disaster. It hasn't been used since the 1980s. Probably hasn't had running water since the 90s. I drove past it once on a hunting trip, Marcus added, wiping tears from his eyes. The roof's half caved in, the windows are all broken out. I'm pretty sure it's condemned. Even Ainsley, who'd never met Rebecca before today, smiled with barely concealed amusement. $1 cabin for a. She paused, searching for the cutting phrase, for someone of your economic bracket. How fitting. Victoria's expression was ice. Vivian always did have a vindictive streak. Clearly, she wanted to give you one final burden before she died. That property is worthless, less than worthless. You'll spend more in back taxes than you'd ever get from selling it. Charlotte, to her credit, looked uncomfortable. Mother, that's hardly. It's hardly what, Charlotte? Victoria snapped. Kind? True? That cabin is a joke, and we all know it. Your grandmother was making a point about where Rebecca belongs, isolated, forgotten, and falling apart. Rebecca felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her cheeks. This was exactly why she'd hesitated to come today. The Ashfords never missed an opportunity to remind her that she wasn't good enough, had never been good enough, and would never be good enough. But something in Vivian's words, more grace, dignity, and genuine character than any member of my family, gave her strength. The old woman had seen something in Rebecca that her own family lacked. And she'd made sure they heard it read aloud in an attorney's office. Attorney Whitmore cleared his throat and slid a manila folder across the table toward Rebecca. Inside was a photograph, a faded color print from what looked like the 1970s, showing a small log cabin nestled among towering Douglas firs and western red cedars. The cabin had a stone chimney, a covered porch, and shuttered windows. In the photo, it looked rustic but charming, like something from a mountain resort advertisement. The property has been in the Ashford family since 1954, Whitmore explained, his tone carefully professional. Mrs. Ashford purchased it with her own inheritance money, separate from the family business holdings. She maintained the property taxes personally through her entire life, they're current through the end of this year. After that, they'll run approximately $950 annually. Rebecca studied the photograph. It was hard to reconcile this cozy-looking cabin with Marcus's description of a condemned wreck. There are no mortgages or liens against the property, Whitmore continued. The title is clear. All that's required is your signature accepting the bequest and a $1 payment to complete the transaction. Rebecca, don't be ridiculous, Victoria said sharply. You can barely afford your current living expenses. Taking on this property will only drag you further into poverty. Mother's right, Christopher added, his tone dripping with false concern. Think about Lily. Can you really afford to waste money on a piece of worthless mountain land? Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering the room. This man had promised to love her forever. He'd held her while she cried over a miscarriage before Lily. He'd sworn the Ashford money didn't matter, that he'd chosen her for who she was. All lies. Or if they'd been true once, they hadn't survived contact with his family's expectations. I'll take it, Rebecca said quietly. The laughter stopped. Excuse me? Victoria's voice was dangerously soft. Rebecca met her former mother-in-law's gaze steadily. I said I'll take it. I accept Mrs. Ashford's bequest. You're making a mistake, Marcus said, still grinning. That place will cost you thousands just to make it safe enough to tear down. That's my decision to make, Rebecca replied. She turned to Whitmore. What do I need to sign? The attorney's expression was carefully neutral, but Rebecca caught something in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or approval. He produced a document from the folder and slid it across the table with a pen. Just here, acknowledging receipt of the property deed, and here, confirming your $1 payment. Rebecca signed both places, her hand steady despite the trembling in her chest. She pulled a crumpled dollar bill from her purse, probably one of the last singles she had until her next paycheck, and placed it on the table. Whitmore accepted it with the solemnity of a much larger transaction, writing out a receipt. The property is now legally yours, Ms. Torres. I'll have the deed transferred into your name and filed with the county registrar by the end of the week. He handed her a second folder, this one thicker. This contains all the documentation, property surveys, tax records, the original purchase papers from 1954, and a set of keys. The property is located approximately 140 miles from here, accessible via Forest Service Road 247. The final 3 miles are unpaved. Rebecca accepted the folder, feeling its unexpected weight. For $1, she'd just become a landowner. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if she weren't so determined not to give the Ashfords the satisfaction. "Well," Victoria said, standing with an air of finality, "I'm sure you'll enjoy your new acquisition. Do try not to get lost in the mountains. Christopher, we have lunch reservations." The family filed out, Marcus still chuckling, Ainsley whispering something to Christopher that made him smirk. Only Charlotte paused at the door. "Rebecca," she said softly, "for what it's worth, grandmother loved that cabin. She used to go there every summer when I was little. She always said it was her favorite place in the world." Before Rebecca could respond, Victoria's sharp voice called from the hallway, "Charlotte." Charlotte grimaced apologetically and left. Rebecca remained seated, the folder in her hands, trying to process what had just happened. Attorney Whitmore gathered his papers quietly, giving her space. "Mr. Whitmore," Rebecca finally said, "can I ask you something?" He paused. "Of course. Was Mrs. Ashford, was she in her right mind when she wrote this will? I don't mean that disrespectfully, I understand your question," Whitmore interrupted gently. "And yes, Mrs. Ashford was completely lucid. In fact, she revised her will just 6 months ago, and she was quite specific about her wishes regarding that property." He hesitated, then added, "She also left me a letter to give you, should you accept the bequest." From his jacket pocket, he produced a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. Rebecca's name was written across the front in Vivian's distinctive handwriting, elegant, old-fashioned, with elaborate flourishes on the capital letters. "She gave this to me 3 years ago," Whitmore explained, "shortly after your divorce was finalized. She said if she hadn't given it to you directly by the time of her death, I was to include it with the property transfer." Rebecca took the envelope with shaking hands. "Miss Torres," Whitmore said, his professional demeanor softening, "I've known the Ashford family for 30 years. I can tell you that Vivian was the best of them. Whatever her reasons for leaving you that property, I guarantee they were not cruel." After he left, Rebecca sat alone in the conference room, the envelope before her. Through the windows, Portland's skyline was beginning to light up as afternoon faded toward evening. She had to pick up Lily from after-school care in an hour. She had laundry to do, bills to worry about, a life to manage on a shoestring budget. But first, she opened the letter. The paper inside was thick, expensive stationery, the kind Vivian used for all her correspondence. "My dear Rebecca. If you're reading this, I've passed on, and you've chosen to accept my final gift to you. I'm glad. The Pinecrest cabin was purchased with my own money in 1954, and it has remained mine alone ever since, the one piece of property Charles's family couldn't claim or control. I've spent some of the happiest days of my life in that cabin, away from the expectations and judgments of the Ashford name. It was my sanctuary, my place of genuine peace. I stopped going in 1986, after Charles died, because the memories became too bittersweet. But I've maintained it all these years, hoping it might serve someone else as it served me. I'm giving it to you because you deserve a sanctuary. You've survived my family's cruelty with more dignity than any of them possess. You've raised my great-granddaughter into a kind, bright child despite receiving minimal support. You've worked yourself to exhaustion and never complained, never asked for what you deserved. The cabin needs work, I'm not blind to that. But it's structurally sound. I had it inspected just last year, and while it needs updating, it's livable. More importantly, it's yours. Truly yours. No Ashford has claim to it, no Ashford can take it from you. There's one more thing, Rebecca. Look beneath the floorboards in the back bedroom, under the window that faces east. I've left you something there that might help with those repairs. Consider it a late wedding gift, one I should have given you when you actually needed it. Live well, my dear. You've earned every happiness. With love and respect, Vivian. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision by the third reading. She carefully folded it and placed it back in the envelope, which she tucked into the property folder. The stakes. That evening, in her cramped two-bedroom apartment in an aging complex near the hospital, Rebecca sat at her small kitchen table after putting Lily to bed. The property folder was spread before her, and she'd been researching Pinecrest Cabin for the past 2 hours. The location was remote, nearly 140 miles east of Portland, deep in the Cascade Range. The cabin sat at the end of Forest Service Road 247, which according to Google Maps turned from paved to gravel to dirt over its final stretches. The nearest town was Timberline Falls, population 847, approximately 12 miles away. Satellite imagery showed a thick canopy of conifers that made it impossible to see the cabin itself. Property records confirmed what Whitmore had said, 3.2 acres, purchased by Vivian Margaret Ashford née Thornton in June 1954 for $1,200. Property taxes for the current year, $947.50, paid in full. Previous tax records, which Rebecca had requested online and received via email, showed Vivian had never missed a payment. 69 years of faithful tax payments on a property she apparently hadn't visited in nearly 40 years. Why? Rebecca's best friend and fellow physical therapist, Destiny Martinez, called at 10 p.m., just as Rebecca was considering calling it a night. "Okay, spill," Destiny said without preamble. "You texted me you won't believe what happened 4 hours ago and then ghosted me. I've been worried you got arrested or something." Rebecca laughed despite her exhaustion. "Not arrested. Just processing." She explained the will reading, the cabin, the mocking laughter, Vivian's letter. Destiny was silent for a long moment. "So let me get this straight. Your dead ex-mother-in-law, who was actually nice to you, left you a cabin that her terrible living family thinks is worthless, but which she maintained for almost 70 years and said has something hidden in it. That's the situation, yes? Girl, this is either the best thing that's ever happened to you or the setup for a horror movie. Where are you going?" "Going where?" "To the cabin. You have to go check it out. What if there's, like, buried treasure or something?" Rebecca rubbed her tired eyes. "Destiny, I can't just drop everything and drive 3 hours into the mountains. I have shifts scheduled, and Lily has school, and I don't even know if my car would make it on those dirt roads. When's your next day off?" "Thursday." "Perfect. I'll go with you. We'll make a day trip of it, leave early, check out the cabin, be back by dinner. Mario can pick up the kids from school." Rebecca hesitated. The responsible choice would be to ignore the cabin for now, maybe visit in the spring when weather was better. But Vivian's words echoed in her mind, "Look beneath the floorboards in the back bedroom. What if it's dangerous?" Rebecca asked. "Marcus said the roof was caved in. Then we take pictures, call a contractor for an estimate, and make an informed decision about selling." "But Rebecca, you have to at least look." This was important to Vivian. She maintained this place for 70 years. She wrote you that letter 3 years ago and kept it sealed, waiting. There's something there. Rebecca looked at her bank statement, pulled up on her laptop. After rent, utilities, food, gas, and Lily's childcare, she had $347 left until her next paycheck in 10 days. If the cabin was truly worthless, she'd have to sell it quickly to avoid next year's property taxes. But if Vivian had hidden something valuable beneath the floorboards? "Okay," Rebecca said. "Thursday. But we leave at 6 a.m., and we're back by 4 p.m. latest. I don't want to be on mountain roads after dark." "Deal." This is so exciting. We're like treasure hunters. After hanging up, Rebecca returned to the property folder. Tucked at the bottom was something she hadn't noticed before, a small key attached to a wooden tag with Pinecrest burned into it. The key was old-fashioned, brass, with an intricate bit pattern. She also found a hand-drawn map, created by Vivian herself judging by the handwriting. It showed Forest Service Road 247 with detailed notes. Pavement ends at mile marker 8.6, bare left at the Fallen Cedar, Creek crossing, passable except during spring runoff. Cabin is 0.3 miles past the boulder shaped like a bear. The meticulousness of it struck Rebecca. Vivian had created this map to ensure someone could find the cabin, even decades after she'd last visited. This wasn't the act of someone abandoning a worthless property. This was someone preserving access to something important. Rebecca pulled up Google Earth and traced the route. Most of it was straightforward, Highway 26 east out of Portland, then connecting to Forest Service Road 247 near the small town of Timberline Falls. The road snaked through dense forest, climbing gradually into the mountains. Using the measurement tool, she confirmed it was approximately 138 miles one way. In her 9-year-old Honda Civic, that meant about 3 hours of driving, probably more given the rough roads near the end. She checked her gas gauge mentally. She had about a quarter tank, which wouldn't be enough. She'd need to fill up Thursday morning, which meant at least $40 for gas. She mentally subtracted it from her $347 cushion. $307 left. Was she really doing this? Driving 3 hours into the mountains to check on a cabin the Ashfords thought was worthless, based on a cryptic message from a woman who'd been dead for 3 weeks? But Vivian had been the only person in that family who'd seen her as human. The only one who'd offered kindness without conditions. If Vivian thought this cabin was worth giving her, worth maintaining for 70 years, then Rebecca owed it to her memory to at least look. She created a new document on her laptop and titled it Pinecrest Cabin Investigation Plan. It felt absurdly formal, but Rebecca had learned that organization was how you survived chaos. She began making lists. What to bring? Flashlights, check batteries. First aid kit. Water and snacks. Phone charger, portable battery. Camera for documentation. Work gloves. Pry bar, to lift floorboards. Notebook and pen. What to look for? Structural damage. Water damage. Wildlife infestation. Hidden compartment under back bedroom floor. Any indication of what Vivian meant? Questions to answer. Is it actually livable or beyond repair? What's the actual property value? What are the real costs of keeping versus selling? What did Vivian hide under the floorboards? Rebecca saved the document and finally allowed herself to feel a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Maybe even hope. Whatever happened Thursday, at least she was doing something. Taking action. Following a lead. For 3 years since the divorce, she'd been in survival mode, just working, parenting, sleeping, repeat. No adventures, no surprises, no possibilities. This cabin, ridiculous as it seemed, was a possibility. She thought about calling her mother in Phoenix, then decided against it. Mom would only worry and try to talk her out of it. Better to wait until she had concrete information. Before bed, Rebecca stood in the doorway of Lily's tiny bedroom, really just a converted walk-in closet, but it gave her daughter some privacy. Lily slept sprawled across her twin bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and library books. She had Christopher's dark hair but Rebecca's brown eyes and olive complexion. She was kind, curious, and completely unaware of how much her mother struggled to give her a normal childhood. "Maybe this will be good news, baby," Rebecca whispered. "Maybe your great-grandmother gave us a chance." Thursday morning arrived cold and drizzly, typical October weather in Portland. Rebecca had barely slept, her mind churning through scenarios ranging from discovering the cabin was worth millions to finding it had burned down years ago and no one had bothered to tell Vivian. She dropped Lily off at school early, kissing her goodbye and promising to be home in time for dinner. "Mommy has to go check on something Grandma Vivian left us," she explained. Lily, who had adored Vivian during the few times they'd met, accepted this easily. Destiny arrived at 6:15 a.m. in her much newer SUV, carrying a box of donuts and 2 large coffees. "Okay, treasure hunter, let's do this." They stopped for gas, and Rebecca watched the pump click steadily upward, each dollar feeling like it was being pulled directly from her future security. $43.50 to fill the tank. She swiped her debit card and tried not to calculate how many meals that would have been. The drive out of Portland was quiet, both women nursing their coffees as the city gave way to suburbs, then to farmland, then to the dense forests of the Cascade foothills. They took Highway 26 east, following the same route weekend skiers would take to Mount Hood in a few months. "So what do you think she hid?" Destiny asked as they passed through the tiny town of Zigzag. "I have no idea. Could be anything. Money, maybe? Documents? What if it's like a deed to a gold mine or something?" Rebecca laughed. "I think you've been watching too many movies. Or not enough. Come on, Rebecca, this is straight out of a treasure hunt story." The wise old woman leaves the underdog protagonist a mysterious property with hidden secrets that will somehow save the day. Real life doesn't work like that. Maybe yours does now. They reached Timberline Falls just after 9 a.m. It was barely a town, a main street with a general store, a diner, a gas station, and a post office. A hand-painted sign announced Population 847, "Welcome to Timberline Falls, gateway to the Cascades." "Should we stop and ask about the cabin?" Destiny suggested. Rebecca considered it. In a town this small, people probably knew the properties in the area. But something made her hesitate. The Ashfords had laughed at this cabin, dismissed it as worthless. What if they were wrong? What if there was something valuable? The fewer people who knew she was investigating, the better. "Let's see it first," Rebecca decided. "We can always come back and ask questions later." Beyond Timberline Falls, Forest Service Road 247 wound into deeper wilderness. The pavement was decent at first, though narrow and winding. They passed a few driveways leading to unseen homes, but traffic was non-existent. At mile marker 8.6, exactly as Vivian's map indicated, the pavement ended. The gravel road beyond was rougher but still passable. Destiny's SUV handled it without complaint. Bare left at the fallen cedar, Destiny read from Vivian's map. "There, I see it." A massive fallen cedar, easily 6 feet in diameter, lay beside the road. They took the left fork, which became narrower and more primitive. The forest here was old growth, trees rising like cathedral columns on both sides. Very little sunlight penetrated the canopy. The sense of isolation was profound. They hadn't seen another vehicle in 20 minutes. "Creek crossing ahead," Rebecca warned. The creek was maybe 10 feet wide, running over the road in a shallow ford. The water was clear and cold, probably fed by snowmelt from higher elevations. Destiny navigated it carefully, the SUV's tires finding purchase on the rocky bottom. "Boulder shaped like a bear," Destiny said. "That should be coming up." And there it was, an enormous granite boulder beside the road, weathered and moss-covered, but with a profile that did indeed resemble a bear's head in silhouette. "Cabin is 0.3 miles past the boulder," Rebecca read, her heart now pounding with genuine anticipation. The road here was barely more than 2 tracks through the forest. Branches scraped the sides of Destiny's SUV. Then, through the trees ahead, Rebecca saw it. The cabin. The cabin emerged from the forest like something from a storybook, and Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. This was nothing, absolutely nothing, like what the Ashfords had described. Yes, the structure showed its age. The logs had weathered to a silvery gray, and moss grew on the north-facing roof shingles. But the roof itself was intact, not caved in as Marcus had claimed. The windows, while dusty and covered with shutters, appeared unbroken. The stone chimney stood solid and straight, showing no signs of structural damage. The cabin was larger than Rebecca had expected from the photograph, easily 800 square feet, maybe more. It had a deep covered porch that wrapped around the front and one side, supported by peeled log posts. The porch railing, while weathered, looked sturdy. A rusted but functional-looking metal chair sat beside the front door, as if waiting for someone to return and sit down. "This is condemned?" Destiny said incredulously, parking the SUV in a small clearing that had once been a driveway. "Rebecca, your ex-family are either blind or they lied to you." Rebecca climbed out slowly, taking in the surroundings. The 3.2 acres were mostly forested, but someone, Vivian, presumably, had cleared enough space around the cabin to prevent fire danger and allow sunlight. A small shed stood about 30 yards away, its door hanging at an angle but the structure itself sound. Beyond that, Rebecca could hear running water, probably a creek or stream. The air smelled incredible: pine sap, earth, the faint sweetness of decomposing leaves. Birds called from the canopy above. In the distance, a woodpecker hammered against a tree. The silence beneath these sounds was profound: no traffic, no city noise, no human activity except their own breathing. "It's beautiful," Rebecca whispered. Destiny was walking the perimeter, her phone out taking pictures. The foundation looks solid. The logs are weathered but not rotted. The chimney's straight, that's important. "Rebecca, I think your monster-in-law actually gave you something valuable." Rebecca approached the front steps carefully, testing each one before putting her full weight on it. The wood was solid, barely creaking. The porch boards were worn but sound. She pulled out the brass key Whitmore had given her, her hand shaking slightly. The front door was heavy wood, stained dark with age and sealed with some kind of protective coating. The lock was old-fashioned, matching the key. Rebecca inserted it, half expecting it not to work after so many years. It turned smoothly. The door swung inward with a horror movie creak that would have been comical if Rebecca's heart weren't pounding so hard. She fumbled for her flashlight, there would be no electricity out here, and clicked it on. The beam revealed a space frozen in time. Inside the time capsule. The interior was a single great room with exposed log walls and a vaulted ceiling. Dust covered everything in a thick gray blanket, and cobwebs draped the corners like Halloween decorations. But underneath the neglect, Rebecca could see careful craftsmanship and thoughtful design. A river rock fireplace dominated one wall, the hearth large enough to stand in. The mantel was thick rough-hewn timber, probably cut from the property itself. Mounted above it was a faded but still visible landscape painting, "Mountains at Sunset," done in oils. To the left, a small kitchen area featured a cast-iron sink, a vintage wood-burning stove, and open shelving. The counters were butcher block, aged to a rich honey color. All the dishes were still in place, plates, cups, bowls, covered in dust but appearing intact. The furniture was mid-century rustic, a sofa with faded plaid upholstery, 2 matching armchairs, a coffee table made from a cross-section of an enormous tree trunk. Everything was arranged facing the fireplace, creating a cozy conversation area. Against the back wall, Rebecca could see 2 doors, bedrooms, presumably, and what looked like a bathroom between them. "Oh my God," Destiny breathed, coming up behind her. "Rebecca, this place is amazing. It's like a time capsule from the 1950s. Rebecca moved deeper into the room, her flashlight beam picking out details. Books lined a built-in shelf beside the fireplace, hard covers, their spines faded but titles still readable. A basket beside the hearth still held kindling and old newspapers, the top one dated August 15, 1986. "That's the last time Vivian was here," Rebecca said, picking up the newspaper carefully. The paper was brittle, yellowed, but preserved by the dry mountain air. She said in her letter she stopped coming after Charles died. He died in June 1986. On the coffee table, Rebecca found more traces of that final visit: a coffee cup with dried residue at the bottom, a book left open and face down, a mystery novel by Agatha Christie, a pair of reading glasses folded neatly beside it. It was as if Vivian had simply stood up, walked out, and never returned. 37 years of silence. Destiny was exploring the kitchen. The stove is vintage but looks functional. The sink has a pump handle, that's probably connected to a well. "Rebecca, this cabin has been maintained. Someone's been paying for upkeep, not just property taxes." Rebecca hadn't thought of that. She moved to the nearest window and unlatched the shutters, pushing them open. Sunlight flooded in, illuminating thousands of dust particles in the air and revealing even more details. The floor was wide plank pine, worn smooth by decades of use but solid. The log walls had been chinked carefully, no visible gaps or crumbling. Even the ceiling looked sound, no water stains, no sagging, no evidence of the roof damage Marcus had claimed. They lied, Rebecca said, anger building in her chest. The Ashfords knew this place was fine. They lied to humiliate me, to make me feel like Vivian had given me garbage. Or, Destiny suggested, they haven't been here in decades and just assumed it had fallen apart. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by ignorance and all that. Rebecca wasn't convinced. Victoria Ashford didn't do anything by accident. If she'd claimed the cabin was worthless, she'd had a reason. But that mystery could wait. Right now, Rebecca needed to explore the bedrooms, specifically, the back bedroom with the east-facing window. The back bedroom. The first door Rebecca tried opened into a small bathroom. It was basic but complete, a toilet, a pedestal sink, and a clawfoot tub with a shower attachment. Everything was covered in dust, but again, nothing appeared damaged. The fixtures were vintage brass, probably valuable to salvage dealers if nothing else. The second door led to what had clearly been Vivian's bedroom during her visits. It was smaller than the main room but beautifully proportioned, with a peaked ceiling that followed the roofline. A double bed with an iron frame dominated the space, still made up with faded quilts. A dresser stood against one wall, its surface holding a silver hairbrush set and a framed photograph. Rebecca picked up the photograph carefully, blowing dust off the glass. It showed a much younger Vivian, maybe in her 40s, standing beside a handsome man in front of this very cabin. They both wore casual hiking clothes and genuine smiles. Charles Ashford, Rebecca presumed. Vivian's husband, Christopher's father. The man Victoria had apparently made miserable before his death freed him. But it was the window that drew Rebecca's attention. The east-facing window, just as Vivian had specified in her letter. It was larger than the others, designed to catch the morning sun. Through its dusty panes, Rebecca could see the forest stretching away, bright green and gold in the October light. Look beneath the floorboards in the back bedroom, under the window that faces east. Rebecca knelt beside the window, running her hands over the wide pine planks. They were secured with square-headed nails, the kind used in old construction. The wood was smooth, worn by time and feet. "What are you looking for?" Destiny asked from the doorway. Vivian said she left something under the floorboards. "Right here, under this window." Rebecca pulled out the pry bar she'd brought from home and examined the boards more carefully. Most were nailed down solidly, but one plank, the one directly beneath the window, had a slight gap at one end, as if it had been removed and replaced. She wedged the pry bar into the gap and applied gentle pressure. The board lifted easily. Beneath it was a rectangular cavity between the floor joists, about 3 feet long and a foot wide. And inside that cavity, wrapped in oilcloth and plastic, were packages. Rebecca's hands shook as she reached in and lifted out the first package. The hidden collection. The oilcloth was old but had done its job, everything inside was perfectly dry and preserved. Rebecca carefully unwrapped the first package on the bedroom floor while Destiny watched with barely contained excitement. Inside was a flat wooden box, the kind expensive items came in. Rebecca opened it. And gasped. It was a painting. Maybe 12 inches by 16 inches, oil on canvas, depicting a mountain landscape that looked remarkably like the view from this very cabin. The style was impressionistic, with bold brushstrokes and vivid colors that seemed to capture light itself. In the bottom right corner was a signature, T. Whitmore, 1948. Thomas Whitmore, Destiny breathed. "Rebecca, do you know who Thomas Whitmore was?" Rebecca shook her head, carefully setting the painting aside. He was a Pacific Northwest regional artist. Not super famous nationally, but highly collectible in Oregon and Washington. My aunt has one of his prints in her house, she paid like $500 for it. But an original? That could be worth. How much? Rebecca's voice was barely audible. I don't know. Thousands, maybe? We'd need an appraiser. But there were more packages. The second contained another painting, this one by someone named M. Hansen, dated 1952. It showed the Columbia River Gorge in autumn, the colors so vivid they seemed to glow even in the dim bedroom light. The third package held not a painting but a collection of smaller items wrapped individually, carved wooden figures, clearly Native American in origin. Each piece was labeled with careful handwriting: Chinook salmon totem, cedar, circa 1890. Eagle spirit carving, yellow cedar, attributed to James Skokomish, 1875. Rebecca counted 8 carvings in total, each more beautiful than the last. The fourth package was the largest. Inside was a painting that took Rebecca's breath away, a large canvas, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet, depicting a Native American woman in traditional dress standing beside a waterfall. The detail was extraordinary, from the beadwork on her dress to the individual droplets of water in the falls. The signature read, Adelaide Whitmore, 1891. "Oh my God," Destiny whispered. Rebecca, Adelaide Whitmore was Thomas's grandmother. She was one of the first professional female artists in the Pacific Northwest. Her work is in museums. Rebecca was afraid to touch it. "How do you know all this?" "My aunt is an art history professor at Portland State. She's obsessed with regional artists. Adelaide Whitmore paintings are rare, she didn't do many, and most are in private collections or museums. This could be worth." Destiny pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. After a moment, she held it out to Rebecca. It was an auction record from Christie's, dated 2019. An Adelaide Whitmore painting of similar size had sold for $127,000. Rebecca sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. $127,000. For one painting. And there were at least a dozen artworks in this hidden cache, plus the Native American carvings, which were probably valuable in their own right. "There's more," Destiny said, reaching into the cavity. The fifth package contained documents in plastic sleeves. Rebecca spread them out on the floor. Provenance papers for each artwork, documenting their history and authenticity. Appraisals from 1954, showing what Vivian had paid for each piece. A handwritten letter from Vivian, dated 3 years ago. Rebecca picked up the letter with trembling hands. "Dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, you've found my collection. I've thought about what to do with these pieces for many years, and I've decided they belong with you. I began collecting Pacific Northwest art in the early 1950s, shortly after Charles and I were married. His family thought it was a frivolous hobby, they were timber people, not art people. But I saw something important in preserving the work of regional artists, particularly those documenting the landscapes and indigenous peoples that were rapidly disappearing. Over the years, I acquired pieces whenever I could afford them, always using my own money, never family funds. This cabin became my gallery, my private museum. I'd come here to be surrounded by beauty that the Ashford family couldn't touch or diminish. When Charles died, I couldn't bear to visit anymore. But I couldn't sell the collection either. So I hid it, maintained the cabin, and waited for someone worthy to give it to. You're that person, Rebecca. You survived my family with your integrity intact. You've raised Lily to be kind and curious despite receiving minimal support. You deserve security, comfort, and the knowledge that you're valued. The collection's current value is likely significant, art prices have risen considerably since I last had things appraised. Use it however you wish, sell it all and secure your future, keep pieces you love, donate some to museums. It's yours to decide. But Rebecca, there's something else you should know. Not all of these pieces came to me through legitimate channels. Some were recovered from collectors who obtained them unethically. I've done my best to document this in the provenance papers, but there are gaps. Deliberate gaps. If anyone comes asking questions about this collection, and someone might, please know that my intentions were always to preserve art that belonged to the people of this region, not to wealthy collectors in New York or Europe. Be careful. The art world can be treacherous, especially when money and history collide. With all my love and faith in you, Vivian. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, her mind racing. Not all legitimate channels. Recovered from unethical collectors. Someone might come asking questions. What does that mean? Destiny asked, reading over her shoulder. I think, Rebecca said slowly, it means some of these artworks might have complicated ownership histories. She turned to the provenance documents, examining them more carefully. Most were straightforward: bills of sale, gallery records, appraisal documents. But a few had notes in Vivian's handwriting, recovered from the Morrison estate sale, 1967, originally stolen from Jameson Gallery, 1931. Purchased from anonymous seller, 1972, believed to be part of the Blackwell collection that disappeared in 1945. Your grandmother-in-law was an art detective, Destiny said with something like admiration. Or an art thief, Rebecca countered. Or someone who rescued stolen art and preserved it until it could be properly handled. Destiny gestured at the paintings. Either way, this is your inheritance now. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Rebecca looked at the collection spread across the bedroom floor. Even conservatively estimated, it had to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. This could change everything. Pay off her debts. Buy a house. Fund Lily's education. Give them security she'd never imagined possible. But Vivian's warning echoed in her mind: be careful. The art world can be treacherous. The inventory. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca and Destiny carefully cataloged everything in the hidden cache. The final inventory was staggering. Paintings. Thomas Whitmore Landscape, 1948, estimated value, $15,000 to $25,000. M. Hanson Columbia River Gorge, 1952, estimated value, $8,000 to $12,000. Adelaide Whitmore Portrait, 1891, estimated value, $100,000 to $150,000. R. Jacobson Coastal Scene, 1956, estimated value, $6,000 to $10,000. Adelaide Whitmore Waterfall Scene, 1889, estimated value, $80,000 to $120,000. T. Whitmore Mountain Series, set of 3, 1950 to 1953, estimated value, $40,000 to $60,000. Unknown artist, Native American ceremonial scene, circa 1880, value uncertain, possibly significant. Carvings and artifacts, 8 Native American cedar carvings, 1875 to 1920, estimated value, $30,000 to $50,000 collectively. 9. Chinook basket collection, 6 pieces, 1890 to 1910, estimated value, $15,000 to $25,000. 10. Trade beads and ceremonial items, various dates, estimated value, $5,000 to $10,000. Total conservative estimated value, $299,000 to $462,000. And that was using the old appraisals and basic internet research. Professional appraisals might reveal the collection was worth even more. Rebecca sat on the dusty bedroom floor, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of dollars in artwork, and started laughing. It came out slightly hysterical, but she couldn't stop. I bought this for $1, she managed between laughs. The Ashfords laughed at me for accepting a $1 cabin, and there's $500,000 hidden in the floor. Destiny was grinning. The universe has a sense of humor. But as Rebecca's laughter faded, reality set in. This wasn't a simple inheritance. Vivian's warnings about complicated provenance, about people asking questions, about the art world being treacherous, those weren't idle concerns. If even one of these pieces was stolen or had disputed ownership, Rebecca could face legal challenges. Worse, if the Ashfords found out about the collection's value, they might challenge Vivian's bequest. Claims she was mentally incompetent, or that Rebecca had unduly influenced her, or any number of other lies wealthy families told when money was at stake. We need to be smart about this, Rebecca said, her practical nurse's mind taking over. We can't just walk into an auction house with $500,000 in artwork and expect no questions. What are you thinking? Rebecca started carefully repacking the artworks in their protective wrappings. First, we document everything. Photos, measurements, condition reports. Then we research proper authentication and appraisal services. We need experts who can verify these pieces and help us understand the provenance issues. And we don't tell anyone, Destiny added. Especially not the Ashfords. Especially not them. As they worked, Rebecca's mind raced through possibilities. She needed to understand art law, ownership rights, how to legally sell inherited artwork. She needed to know if any of these pieces were reported stolen, and if so, what her obligations were. She also needed to understand why Vivian had accumulated this specific collection. It wasn't random, there was a pattern here. Pacific Northwest artists, indigenous artifacts, pieces from the late 1800s through the 1950s. All documenting a particular time and place. Some were recovered from collectors who obtained them unethically. What did that mean? Had these pieces been stolen from Native American communities? Looted from galleries? Seized during the Depression when families sold artwork for survival money? Rebecca was pulling one last package from the cavity when her fingers brushed against something else, another envelope, taped to the underside of a floor joist where it would have been invisible unless you were looking for it. She peeled it free carefully. The envelope was sealed with wax, Vivian's initials stamped into the seal. On the front, in Vivian's handwriting, for Rebecca, open only if challenged. "What's that?" Destiny asked. "I don't know. But Vivian wanted me to have it if things got complicated." Rebecca started to break the seal, then stopped. Vivian had been specific, open only if challenged. That implied Rebecca should wait until she faced some kind of opposition or threat. She tucked the envelope into her jacket pocket. Whatever secrets it contained could wait. The rest of the cabin. With the artwork carefully repacked and secured in Destiny's SUV, they weren't leaving it in the cabin overnight. Rebecca took time to explore the rest of the property more thoroughly. The small shed contained tools, all vintage but well-maintained, axes, saws, a wheelbarrow, coils of rope, boxes of nails and screws. Everything was organized and protected from the elements. Again, evidence that someone had been maintaining this property, even if Vivian herself hadn't visited. Rebecca made a mental note to check the property records for any maintenance contracts or caretaker agreements. The creek she'd heard earlier ran about 50 yards behind the cabin, clear and cold, probably fed by mountain springs. The water was pristine enough to drink, though Rebecca wouldn't without testing it first. A small wooden bridge crossed it, leading to a trail that wound deeper into the forest. Back at the cabin, Rebecca tested systems. The hand pump in the kitchen still worked, drawing water from what must be a well beneath the cabin. The water ran rusty at first, the pipes hadn't been used in decades, but clear after a few minutes. She'd need to have it tested, but it was another sign the cabin's infrastructure was sound. The wood stove in the kitchen was a beauty, a vintage O'Keefe and Merritt, its porcelain still gleaming under the dust. It would need cleaning and probably new gaskets, but it was entirely functional. The fireplace drew properly when Rebecca opened the flue, no bird nests or obstructions. The chimney had been capped to prevent animal intrusion, another sign of ongoing maintenance. This place could be livable with some work, Destiny observed. New mattresses, deep cleaning, fresh linens. The structure is solid. You'd need to deal with utilities, maybe solar panels for electricity, propane for cooking and heating water. But Rebecca, this could actually be a home. Rebecca stood in the center of the main room, turning slowly to take it all in. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows she'd opened, painting golden rectangles on the plank floor. The river rock fireplace waited patiently for its next fire. The vintage furniture, under its layers of dust, was actually quite beautiful. And it was hers. Not the Ashfords'. Not subject to their approval or control. Hers. For the first time since the divorce, Rebecca owned something of value that no one could take away. "I could come here," she said softly. "Bring Lily. On weekends, during summer. It could be our place. With $500,000 in art sales, you could do more than visit," Destiny pointed out. "You could renovate. Make it comfortable. Maybe even—" "Don't," Rebecca interrupted. "Don't let me dream too big yet. Not until we know what we're dealing with." But it was too late. The dream was already taking root. The drive home. They locked up the cabin carefully, Rebecca taking one last look before closing the door. In a single day, this place had transformed from a joke inheritance to a potential sanctuary. From worthless to priceless. The drive back to Portland was quieter than the morning journey. Both women were lost in thought, processing what they'd discovered. Rebecca's mind kept returning to Vivian's warnings. Someone might come asking questions. Be careful. The art world can be treacherous. Who might come asking? Other collectors? The Ashfords, if they learn the truth? Law enforcement, if any pieces were stolen? And what was in the sealed envelope? What had Vivian thought Rebecca might be challenged about? They stopped for gas and coffee in Timberline Falls. While Destiny filled the tank, Rebecca stepped into the small general store to use the restroom and grab snacks. The store was exactly what you'd expect in a town of 847 people, narrow aisles packed with essentials, a small deli counter, local notices on a bulletin board by the entrance. An elderly man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. Rebecca was browsing the snack aisle when she overheard him on the phone. Yeah, I saw them drive through this morning. 2 women in a newer SUV, heading up 247. No, I didn't recognize them. Could be tourists, could be hikers. Well, there's not much up that road except some old hunting cabins and the Ashford place. Rebecca froze. The Ashford place. People here knew the cabin belonged to the Ashfords. The man continued, nobody's been up there in years, far as I know. Old Lady Ashford used to come every summer back in the 70s and 80s, but that was before your time. Rebecca quickly grabbed a bag of chips and some granola bars, paid cash, and left without making eye contact. Her heart was pounding. In the SUV, she told Destiny what she'd heard. So the locals know the cabin exists, Destiny said. That's not necessarily bad. But we should be careful about how often we come up here, at least until you figure out what to do with the collection. Agreed. As they rejoined Highway 26 heading west, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her blood ran cold. It was from Christopher. Heard you actually accepted grandmother's junk cabin. Hope you enjoy the property taxes and maintenance costs. Some gifts are just expensive burdens. See. How did he know she'd been to the cabin? She hadn't told anyone except Destiny. Had the Ashfords been watching her? Was someone monitoring the property? Or was it just a coincidence, Christopher being his usual cruel self? Rebecca showed Destiny the message. That's creepy timing, Destiny said. You think they're having you followed? I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid. But Vivian's warnings echoed again, be careful. By the time they reached Portland, it was almost 5 p.m. Rebecca picked up Lily from after-school care, hugging her daughter extra tight. Did you find what Grandma Vivian left us? Lily asked innocently. Rebecca met Destiny's eyes over her daughter's head. Yes, sweetheart. I did. That night, after Lily was asleep, Rebecca spread out the photographs she'd taken of each artwork on her kitchen table. She had documentation now. Evidence. Proof of what she'd found. But she also had questions. Lots of questions. She opened her laptop and began researching Pacific Northwest art dealers, appraisers, and auction houses. She needed experts she could trust. People who understood provenance issues and complex ownership histories. She also searched for information about art theft and recovery. What were her legal obligations if some of these pieces had been stolen? Could she be charged with possession of stolen property, even though she'd inherited them? What statute of limitations applied? The law was complicated, she discovered. Stolen art could be claimed by original owners for decades, even generations. But there were also doctrines about good faith purchasers and statute of limitations that might protect her. She needed a lawyer. An art lawyer. Someone who specialized in exactly these kinds of complicated inheritance cases. But lawyers cost money she didn't have. At least, not yet. Rebecca's phone buzzed again. Another text from Christopher, by the way, Mom's been trying to reach you. Something about the cabin paperwork. You should call her back. Rebecca's jaw clenched. She hadn't given Victoria her number after the divorce, and she certainly wasn't going to start communicating with her now. She blocked Christopher's number and set her phone aside. Whatever the Ashfords wanted, it could wait. Right now, Rebecca had a collection to protect, a mystery to solve, and a daughter to keep safe. The cabin in the mountains held secrets worth $500,000. But as Vivian had warned, it also held danger. Rebecca just didn't know yet where that danger would come from. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The research begins. Rebecca barely slept that first night after discovering the collection. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adelaide Whitmore's paintings, the Native American carvings, and Vivian's warning written in elegant script, "Be careful. The art world can be treacherous." By 3 a.m., she gave up trying to sleep and moved to her kitchen table with her laptop. Lily wouldn't wake for another 3 hours, time Rebecca could use to understand exactly what she'd inherited. She started with Adelaide Whitmore, the artist whose 2 paintings were likely the most valuable pieces in the collection. The internet provided a treasure trove of information, though much of it was scattered across academic journals, museum databases, and auction records. Adelaide Margaret Whitmore had been born in 1847 in Boston, daughter of a shipping merchant. Against her family's wishes, she'd studied art in Paris during the 1860s, then moved west in 1875, settling in what would become Portland. She'd been one of the first professionally trained female artists in the Pacific Northwest, documenting Native American life, landscapes, and the rapid changes brought by westward expansion. Her work had been celebrated during her lifetime, exhibited in galleries from San Francisco to New York. But after her death in 1903, much of her work had been sold off, scattered, or lost. Only about 60 authenticated Adelaide Whitmore paintings were known to exist, most in museums or private collections that rarely came to market. The last Adelaide Whitmore painting to sell at auction, a smaller portrait study, had gone for $143,000 in 2021. Rebecca had 2 larger, more significant works. If they were authenticated, they could easily be worth $250,000 or more combined. But authentication was the key word. Rebecca dove deeper, learning about the complex world of art authentication. It wasn't enough to have a signature or even provenance documents. Experts would need to examine the paintings physically, analyzing paint composition, canvas type, brushwork style, even the wood used in the frames. Any inconsistency could suggest forgery. And forgery was apparently rampant in the art world. The more valuable an artist's work became, the more incentive people had to create fakes. Rebecca found herself down a research rabbit hole about famous art forgeries, authentication scandals, and legal battles over disputed ownership. The art world, she was learning, was exactly as treacherous as Vivian had warned. At 5:30 a.m., Rebecca shifted her focus to the provenance documents Vivian had carefully preserved. She photographed each page and began creating a digital database, tracking the ownership history of each piece. Most were straightforward. Vivian had purchased paintings from reputable galleries in Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco between 1952 and 1978. She'd paid fair market value, received proper receipts, and had pieces appraised by recognized experts. But 6 items had concerning notes in Vivian's handwriting. Item 1, Adelaide Whitmore Portrait, 1891, purchased from anonymous seller, 1967. Seller claimed to be a state executor but provided minimal documentation. Piece matches description of painting reported missing from Hastings collection, 1945. Item 2, Native American ceremonial mask acquired from Morrison estate sale, 1972. Research suggests originally part of Chinook tribal collection removed during 1920s boarding school era. Rightful ownership unclear. Item 3, Thomas Whitmore Mountain Landscape, 1951, private sale, 1969. Seller was grandson of original owner. Family forced to sell during Depression, received fraction of value. Attempted to track family descendants, unsuccessful. Item 4, cedar carving, attributed to James Skokomish, purchased from antique dealer, 1965. Dealer's records show piece acquired from private collection with no further details. Possible connection to items removed from reservation in 1930s. Item 5, set of 3 trade bead necklaces bought at estate auction, 1974. Estate belonged to Charles Blackwell, known collector of questionable ethics. Unable to trace earlier provenance. Item 6, Adelaide Whitmore waterfall scene, 1889, anonymous donation to failed gallery, 1958. Gallery owner provided piece in lieu of debt payment. Original ownership uncertain. Signature authentic per my analysis. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. Vivian hadn't just collected art, she'd been trying to rescue pieces with complicated histories, works that had been stolen, sold under duress, or removed from their rightful communities. It was noble, in a way. But it also meant Rebecca now possessed property that other people might have legitimate claims to. Her phone buzzed with her 6 a.m. alarm, time to wake Lily and start their morning routine. But as Rebecca made breakfast and helped her daughter get ready for school, her mind churned through possibilities. She needed expert advice, but she needed to be careful about who she trusted. The wrong person could alert the Ashfords, or worse, try to claim the collection for themselves. The art historian. After dropping Lily at school, Rebecca drove to Portland State University instead of heading to work. She'd called in sick, one of only 3 sick days she had left this year, but this was too important to wait. Destiny had mentioned her aunt was an art history professor who specialized in Pacific Northwest regional artists. It was a risk, approaching someone she didn't know, but Rebecca needed guidance and she needed it from someone who had no connection to the Ashfords. Professor Carmen Ruiz's office was in the Art History Building, a converted warehouse near campus. Rebecca found her name on the directory and climbed 3 flights of stairs to a hallway lined with doors bearing faculty names. She knocked tentatively. "Come in," called a warm voice with a slight Spanish accent. Professor Ruiz was in her early 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a loose bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her office was organized chaos, books stacked everywhere, slides and photographs covering one entire wall, a laptop surrounded by coffee cups in various stages of emptiness. "Can I help you?" the professor asked, looking up from a paper she was grading. Rebecca had rehearsed this moment in her car. "Professor Ruiz, my name is Rebecca Torres. I'm Destiny Martinez's friend. She said you're an expert on Pacific Northwest art history. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to answer some questions." Recognition sparked in the professor's eyes. "Ah, Destiny. How is my niece? Please, sit down. I always have time for friends of family." Rebecca settled into a chair across from the desk, clutching her bag which contained her phone full of photographs. "She's well. She actually suggested I talk to you because I've recently inherited some artwork, and I don't know what to do with it." "Inherited? How wonderful. What kind of pieces?" Rebecca pulled out her phone and opened the first photograph, one of the Thomas Whitmore landscapes. "This was my ex-husband's grandmother's. She left me several paintings and some Native American artifacts." Professor Ruiz took the phone, her casual interest immediately sharpening into focused attention. She zoomed in on the signature, examining it closely. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to her computer. At Rebecca's nod, she plugged the phone into her computer and transferred the image, then pulled up what appeared to be an extensive database of artwork. She compared Rebecca's photo to several images in her files. "This is a Thomas Whitmore," she said definitively. "Mid-career period, probably early 1950s based on the style. The signature is consistent with his authenticated work from that era." She looked up at Rebecca with new intensity. "Do you have more?" Rebecca showed her the rest of the photographs, all of them except the pieces with questionable provenance. She wanted to gauge the professor's reaction before revealing the complications. By the time Rebecca reached the Adelaide Whitmore paintings, Professor Ruiz had stood up and was pacing her small office, practically vibrating with excitement. "These are extraordinary," she breathed. "Rebecca, do you understand what you have here? Adelaide Whitmore pieces of this quality almost never come to market. The portrait alone could be worth over $100,000, Rebecca finished. "I've done some research." "More," the professor corrected. "Much more, if it's authenticated. The detail work in the dress, the way she captured the waterfall, this is masterwork. This is museum quality. Where did your grandmother-in-law acquire these?" "That's part of why I'm here," Rebecca admitted. "She left me documentation, but some of the provenance is complicated." She showed Professor Ruiz the notes about the 6 questionable pieces, watching the professor's expression carefully. The excitement dimmed slightly, replaced by concern. "I see. Your grandmother-in-law was aware these might have problematic histories. She wrote me a letter saying some were recovered from collectors who obtained them unethically." "I don't know exactly what that means." Professor Ruiz sat back down, her expression thoughtful. "In the art world, particularly with Native American artifacts and works documenting indigenous peoples, there's a long history of theft and exploitation. Items were taken from tribes during forced relocations, sold by dealers who had no right to them, acquired from families who were desperate during the Depression and got pennies on the dollar." "So what do I do?" Rebecca asked. "I don't want to profit from stolen art, but I also don't know how to determine rightful ownership for pieces acquired 70 years ago." "It's complicated," the professor admitted. "The legal standard varies depending on the item and its history. For Native American artifacts, there's the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, which governs how culturally significant items should be returned to tribes. For other art, there are statutes of limitations and good faith purchaser doctrines that might protect you as an inheritor." She pulled out a business card and wrote a name and number on the back. "This is Malcolm Chen. He's an attorney who specializes in art law, authentication disputes, provenance issues, repatriation cases. He's ethical and discreet. Tell him I referred you." Rebecca took the card gratefully. "Thank you. I don't even know if I can afford." "He does pro bono work for cases involving repatriation to indigenous communities," Professor Ruiz interrupted. "If some of your artifacts should be returned to tribes, he'll help you navigate that without charging you. And if the other pieces are clean, he can connect you with reputable auction houses and dealers." The professor leaned forward, her expression serious. "Rebecca, be careful with this collection. If word gets out that Adelaide Whitmore paintings have surfaced, you'll have dealers, collectors, and possibly less savory individuals coming out of the woodwork. The art market can be cutthroat, especially when significant money is involved. That's what Vivian, my grandmother-in-law, warned me about. She was right to warn you. My advice? Get everything authenticated and appraised by multiple independent experts. Understand your legal position on each piece. Then decide whether to sell, donate, or keep. But do it methodically and carefully. Don't rush, and don't trust everyone who offers to help." As Rebecca prepared to leave, Professor Ruiz added, "One more thing. You mentioned this came from your ex-husband's family?" "Yes. The Ashfords. They laughed when I inherited the cabin where these were hidden. They think it's worthless." The professor's eyebrows rose. "The Ashfords of Ashford Timber? You know them?" "Of them. They're major donors to several museums in the state. If they learn what you found..." She trailed off meaningfully. "They'll try to take it," Rebecca finished. "They already think I don't deserve anything from their family. Then you need to move quickly but carefully. Get legal advice, establish clear ownership, and document everything. If they challenge your inheritance, you need to be unassailable." Rebecca left the university with Malcolm Chen's contact information and a growing sense of urgency. The collection was valuable enough to change her life, but also valuable enough that people would fight to take it from her. The attorney's office. Malcolm Chen's office was in the Pearl District, Portland's renovated warehouse area that now housed galleries, boutiques, and upscale law firms. His practice was small, just him and a paralegal, but his credentials were impressive: degrees from Stanford and Yale Law, former counsel for the Seattle Art Museum, published author on art authentication law. Rebecca had called ahead, and he'd agreed to see her that afternoon. The consultation would be $300, money she didn't really have, but couldn't afford not to spend. Chin was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and an intensity that reminded her of the emergency room doctors she worked with. He invited her into a conference room where he'd already set up his laptop and a legal pad covered with notes. "Professor Ruiz emailed me about your situation," he said, getting straight to business. "Inherited art collection, some pieces with provenance concerns, family that might contest the bequest. Let's start with the basics. Do you have the will and deed transfer documents?" Rebecca produced the folder attorney Whitmore had given her. Chin reviewed everything methodically, occasionally making notes. "The will is clear and properly executed," he said after 20 minutes. "Your former grandmother-in-law left you the property and all structures and contents therein. That legal language is key. It means everything inside the cabin is yours, including the artwork. Can the family challenge it?" "They can try. They could claim undue influence, lack of capacity, or that the bequest should have been part of the family estate. But it would be difficult. The will was written and executed 3 years ago, witnessed by multiple parties, and explicitly states the testator's sound mind. The property was purchased with your grandmother-in-law's separate funds, not family money, which gives them no claim to it." Relief washed through Rebecca. "So the collection is legally mine." "Legally yours to possess, yes. But there's a difference between possession and clear title. Let me see the provenance documents." Rebecca showed him everything, the clean pieces and the questionable ones. Chin went through each item carefully, his expression revealing nothing. When he finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. "Okay. Here's the situation. The pieces your grandmother-in-law purchased through legitimate channels with proper documentation, those are yours free and clear. You can sell them, donate them, do whatever you want. That's about 70% of the collection by value. And the other 30%? Complicated. Let's break it down by category." He pulled up a document on his laptop and began typing as he spoke. "The Native American artifacts that might have been removed from tribal communities, those fall under NAGPRA if they're culturally significant. We'd need to identify which tribes they originated from and contact their cultural preservation offices. If they want them back, the law requires repatriation." "I'd want to return them anyway," Rebecca said. "It's the right thing to do." Chin nodded approvingly. "Good. That makes it easier. I can help you navigate that process pro bono, it's work I do regularly. The tribes will appreciate the voluntary repatriation, and it protects you from any legal liability. What about the Adelaide Whitmore portrait that might have been stolen? That's trickier. If it was reported stolen from the Hastings collection in 1945, there should be records. I'll need to research whether the Hastings family or their insurers ever filed claims, and whether any statute of limitations has expired. If the painting was legitimately stolen and never claimed, you could face a replevin action. That's a lawsuit to recover stolen property." Rebecca's heart sank. "So I might have to give it back?" "Possibly. But it depends on the circumstances. If the Hastings family or their heirs can't be located, if they never reported it stolen, or if they accepted insurance payment and the claim now belongs to the insurance company who no longer exists, there are many scenarios where your title could be clear. I'll need to do research." "How long will that take?" "A few weeks for preliminary research. Longer if I need to track down descendants or review insurance records." Chin moved to the next item. "The piece that was sold during the Depression for a fraction of its value, that's probably yours to keep. The original owner voluntarily sold it, even if the price was unfair. Duress sales can be challenged, but after 80+ years with no claims, you're likely safe." He went through each questionable piece, explaining the legal issues and potential risks. By the end, Rebecca's head was spinning with terms like adverse possession, bona fide purchaser, and statute of limitations. Bottom line, Chen said, I think you're in decent shape legally. The Native American artifacts should be repatriated, I'll help with that. The Adelaide Whitmore portrait needs research, but there's a good chance your title is clear or can be made clear. The other pieces are probably fine. How much will all this cost? Rebecca asked, dreading the answer. The repatriation work is free, that's something I do as service work. The provenance research will take time. I'd estimate 20 hours at my usual rate, but given Professor Ruiz's referral and the nature of the case, I'd be willing to do it for a flat fee of $5,000. If you decide to sell pieces, I can also help negotiate with auction houses and take a small percentage instead of hourly fees. $5,000. Rebecca's entire emergency fund plus money she didn't have. Chen must have seen her expression. Alternatively, if you're willing to wait, I could take this on as a teaching case. I'm guest lecturing at Lewis and Clark Law School this semester. This is exactly the kind of complex provenance issue my students need to learn about. They do the research under my supervision, at no cost to you. How long would that take? The semester ends in December. We could have preliminary research done by early November, full analysis by year-end. November was 6 weeks away. Year-end was 2.5 months. Could Rebecca wait that long? Victoria Ashford was already trying to reach her. Christopher was sending creepy texts. Someone in Timberline Falls knew she'd visited the cabin. But she couldn't afford $5,000. Let's do the teaching case, Rebecca decided. But is there anything I should do immediately to protect myself? Yes. Several things. Chen opened a new document and began typing. First, get everything professionally photographed and cataloged. I can recommend a conservator who specializes in documenting collections. Second, store the pieces securely, not in your apartment. A climate-controlled storage unit with insurance. Third, don't tell anyone else about the collection. The fewer people who know, the better. I already told my friend Destiny. Can you trust her completely? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Yes. Then she's fine. But no one else. Not family, not coworkers, no one. Fourth, if anyone from your ex-husband's family contacts you about the cabin, refer them to me. Don't engage directly. Victoria's already trying to reach me. Chen's expression sharpened. About what? I don't know. Christopher said something about paperwork. Don't respond. If she persists, give her my contact information. From this point forward, I'm your attorney of record regarding the Pinecrest cabin property and its contents. Rebecca felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Chen walked her through next steps. He'd draft a letter establishing attorney-client relationship, begin preliminary research on the questionable pieces, and connect her with the conservator for proper documentation. His law students would start researching provenance issues next week. As Rebecca prepared to leave, Chen added, one more thing. Your grandmother-in-law left you a sealed envelope, correct? Marked open only if challenged? Yes. How did you? Professor Ruiz mentioned it. My advice? Don't open it yet. Whatever's in there, she wanted you to save it for when you needed it most. You're not there yet. But keep it very safe. The conservator. Chen's recommended conservator was Dr. Patricia Winters, who operated a small conservation studio in Northwest Portland. She specialized in documenting and preserving artwork, often working with estates, insurance companies, and law enforcement on art theft cases. Rebecca called from Chen's office and managed to schedule an appointment for Saturday morning, her next day off. Dr. Winters quoted a fee of $1,500 for complete documentation of the collection, professional photography, condition reports, UV analysis to detect any restoration or forgery, and detailed written descriptions. It was more money Rebecca didn't have, but Chen assured her it was essential. If anyone challenges your ownership or questions authenticity, proper documentation is your first line of defense. Rebecca agreed, trying not to think about how quickly this was eating into the theoretical value of the collection. By the time she left Chen's office, it was nearly 3 p.m. She'd missed most of her workday and would have to make up the hours somehow. But at least she had a plan now: document everything, research provenance, prepare for potential legal challenges, and hope the Ashfords didn't find out what she had before she was ready to defend it. The first warning. Rebecca picked up Lily from school, then drove to Destiny's house to update her on everything that had happened. Destiny's husband Mario took the kids outside to play while the two women talked in the kitchen. "So you've got lawyers and conservators involved now," Destiny summarized. "This is getting real." It already was real. Now it's just getting expensive. You'll make it back when you sell the clean pieces. Rebecca, even if you have to return or can't sell some of them, you're still looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rebecca wanted to believe that. But Vivian's warnings kept echoing in her mind. The art world is treacherous. Someone might come asking questions. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Rebecca almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Torres?" The voice was male, older, with a refined accent. "My name is Gregory Ashford. I'm Victoria Ashford's brother-in-law. I apologize for calling unannounced, but I understand you recently inherited property from my late sister-in-law Vivian." Rebecca's blood ran cold. She mouthed Ashford family to Destiny, who immediately started recording on her phone. "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Ashford. Please, hear me out. I'm not calling on behalf of Victoria or Christopher. This is a personal matter regarding Vivian's estate. I'd like to discuss it with you in person, if possible. Perhaps coffee tomorrow?" "I have a lawyer," Rebecca said carefully, remembering Chen's advice. "If you have questions about the property, you can contact Malcolm Chen." There was a pause. "I see. Well, yes, I could do that, but this isn't exactly a legal matter. It's more historical. You see, I'm an art collector, and I believe Vivian may have left you something I've been searching for quite some time." Rebecca's grip tightened on the phone. He knew. Somehow, he knew about the collection. "I don't know what you mean," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "The Pinecrest cabin, Miss Torres. Vivian used it as a private gallery. I visited once, many years ago, and saw her collection. Quite impressive. If those pieces are still there, and I suspect they are, they're worth a considerable sum. I'd like to make you an offer. Everything was left to me legally. It's not for sale. I understand you're a single mother, working as a physical therapist. Hospital wages are hardly generous. I'm prepared to offer you $200,000 cash for the contents of that cabin. Sight unseen. You could pay off your debts, secure your daughter's future, and never worry about the complicated legal issues that can arise with certain types of historical art collections." $200,000. It was more money than Rebecca had ever imagined having. But it was also far less than the collection was worth, and the offer came with a veiled threat: complicated legal issues. "No, thank you," Rebecca said firmly. "The collection isn't for sale, and I'm ending this conversation. Don't contact me again." She hung up, her hands shaking. "Holy shit," Destiny breathed. "He knows about the art. How does he know?" "I don't know. Vivian said he visited once, years ago. Maybe he remembered and put two and two together when he heard about the inheritance. Or maybe someone told him you went to the cabin. Remember that guy at the store in Timberline Falls? He was on the phone talking about seeing us." Rebecca's mind raced. If Gregory Ashford knew about the collection, who else did? And what would they do to get it? She immediately called Malcolm Chen and left a voicemail explaining the call. Then she texted him the details in case he needed them immediately. Within 10 minutes, Chen called back. "Did you record the conversation?" Destiny did. "Good. Send me the audio file." "And Rebecca?" "This confirms what I suspected. Your inheritance is valuable enough that people are coming out of the woodwork. You need to move the collection to secure storage immediately. Tonight, if possible. I can't afford. I'll advance you the money for a storage unit. Consider it part of my fee when you eventually sell pieces. But those artworks cannot stay in your apartment or Destiny's car. They need to be in a facility with climate control, insurance, and security. After hanging up, Rebecca and Destiny spent the next 3 hours finding and renting a storage unit in Beaverton, on the outskirts of Portland. It cost $175 per month for a climate-controlled unit, plus a $200 deposit and first month's rent. They moved all the artwork there that evening, each piece still wrapped in its protective coverings. Rebecca took detailed photos of the storage unit, the lock, and each item as they placed it inside. She was the only person with the key and the access code. By the time they finished, it was after 9 p.m. Rebecca was exhausted, running on adrenaline and stress. She picked up Lily from Mario and Destiny's house, where her daughter had fallen asleep on the couch. As she carried Lily to the car, Destiny hugged her tightly. "You're doing the right thing. Vivian wanted you to have this, and you're going to protect it." "I hope so," Rebecca whispered. At home, after putting Lily to bed, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table with all her documentation spread out, photographs, provenance papers, Chen's business card, Dr. Winters's contact information, the storage unit key. And Vivian's sealed envelope. Open only if challenged. Rebecca held it up to the light, trying to see through the thick paper. What had Vivian known? What had she been protecting Rebecca from? A text message interrupted her thoughts. "Unknown number, you made a mistake refusing my offer. The collection belongs with people who understand its value. You're in over your head, Ms. Torres." Rebecca blocked the number, but her hands were shaking. She was being threatened. For artwork she'd inherited legally. For a collection that was supposed to change her life, not endanger it. Vivian had known this would happen. Had known someone would come looking. Had warned Rebecca to be careful. Rebecca looked at the sealed envelope again. She wasn't ready to open it yet, wasn't quite challenged enough to need whatever weapon Vivian had left her. But she was getting close. Whatever was coming, Rebecca knew she needed to be ready. The investigation into her inheritance's value was complete. Now came the harder part, defending it. Three weeks after moving the collection to storage, Rebecca's carefully constructed defenses began to crumble. Victoria Ashford filed a legal challenge claiming Vivian lacked mental capacity when writing her will. Gregory Ashford appeared at Rebecca's workplace, demanding to discuss terms. And most disturbing, someone had attempted to break into her storage unit. Malcolm Chen called an emergency meeting. "It's time," he said simply, and Rebecca knew exactly what he meant. That evening, with Destiny beside her for support, Rebecca finally broke the wax seal on Vivian's envelope. Inside were 3 items, a letter, a photograph, and a legal document that would change everything. The photograph showed a young Vivian standing in an art gallery in 1954, surrounded by paintings. But it was the people with her that made Rebecca's breath catch, Native American elders, their faces solemn and dignified. On the back, Vivian had written, "The day the Chinook Nation entrusted me with their stolen heritage. My promise to protect until the right person could return it home." The letter explained everything. "Dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, the Ashfords have challenged you. I'm not surprised. What I'm about to tell you, I've kept secret for 70 years. In 1954, I learned that my husband's family, the Ashfords, had systematically acquired Native American artifacts and regional art during the Depression by exploiting desperate families. They bought priceless pieces for pennies, then sold them to wealthy East Coast collectors for fortunes. It was legal, but morally bankrupt. Chinook tribal elders approached me discreetly. They knew I was married to an Ashford but believed I might help recover their stolen heritage. I spent the next 25 years quietly buying back pieces whenever they appeared at auction or estate sales, using my own money. The questionable provenance pieces aren't questionable at all, they're documented stolen property I was safeguarding until repatriation was possible. The legal document enclosed is a trust agreement, signed by tribal leaders in 1954 and witnessed by 3 attorneys. It establishes you as successor trustee with full authority to return these items to their rightful communities. The Ashfords can't touch this collection, Rebecca. It was never mine to keep, and therefore never mine to leave you as personal property. It's held in trust for the Chinook Nation and other tribes. You're simply the person I chose to complete the mission I started 70 years ago. But the paintings, those are yours. Legitimately purchased, properly documented, worth enough to change your life. I bought them with money I earned from writing articles and selling my own photographs, not Ashford money. Victoria can't claim them. Return what should be returned. Keep what's yours. And know that you were chosen not despite the Ashfords' cruelty to you, but because of how you survived it with grace. Complete my work, and in doing so, claim your freedom. All my love, Vivian. The legal document was extraordinary, a trust agreement that predated modern repatriation law by decades, explicitly stating the artifacts were held in trust for indigenous communities. It was signed, notarized, and legally bulletproof. The confrontation. The next morning, Rebecca, Malcolm Chen, and representatives from the Chinook Nation met Victoria Ashford and her lawyers in Chen's conference room. Victoria's face was ice as Rebecca presented Vivian's letter and the trust document. "This is fabricated," Victoria hissed. "My mother-in-law would never." "We have witnesses," interrupted William Redfeather, a Chinook tribal attorney. 3 elders still living who remember meeting with Mrs. Ashford in 1954. "We have letters she wrote to tribal leadership spanning 30 years. And we have this trust document, filed with the state in 1954, which your family apparently never knew existed." Chen placed another document on the table. "We've also uncovered records showing Ashford timber systematically exploited Depression-era families, buying cultural artifacts and artwork for fractions of their value. Some of those transactions could be considered fraud under modern law." Victoria's attorney whispered urgently in her ear. "The artifacts will be returned to the Chinook Nation in a ceremony next month," Rebecca said calmly. "The paintings and legitimate artwork are mine, purchased by Vivian with her own money. We have bank records proving it. You have no claim to any of it." "And if we contest," Victoria began. "Then we'll publicize the Ashford family's history of cultural exploitation," Redfeather said quietly. "I don't think your corporate board would appreciate that publicity. Particularly not when you're negotiating contracts on tribal lands in Washington." The room fell silent. Victoria stared at Rebecca with pure hatred, but she was trapped. "How much?" Victoria finally asked. "To make this go away quietly?" "Nothing," Rebecca said. "I don't want your money. I want you to leave me and my daughter alone. Forever." 2 weeks later, Victoria signed a legal agreement. She would drop all challenges to Vivian's will, never contact Rebecca again, and publicly state that the cabin inheritance was legitimate. In return, Rebecca agreed not to publicize the Ashford family's Depression-era exploitation activities. The resolution. The repatriation ceremony was held at the Pinecrest cabin, which Rebecca decided to keep and restore as a small museum documenting Vivian's work in the region's indigenous art history. The Chinook Nation welcomed home their ancestors' carvings, baskets, and ceremonial items in a moving ceremony that left Rebecca in tears. "Your grandmother understood something rare," William Redfeather told her. "That some things are worth more than money. You've honored her memory." The legitimate paintings sold at auction for $847,000. After taxes and fees, Rebecca cleared $623,000. She paid off every debt. Bought a modest house with a yard where Lily could play. Set up a college fund. And donated $100,000 to establish the Vivian Ashford Indigenous Art Preservation Fund. The rest she invested carefully, finally achieving the security she'd never had. 6 months later, Rebecca stood on the porch of the restored Pinecrest cabin, now open to visitors every weekend during summer. Inside, photographs documented Vivian's 70-year mission. Outside, a plaque read, "Some legacies are measured in courage, not currency." Christopher had tried to contact her once, asking for money. She'd blocked him. Victoria had moved to Arizona, reportedly to recover from family stress. And Gregory Ashford? He'd disappeared from public life after his role in the intimidation campaign came to light. Rebecca's phone rang, Destiny, calling to confirm their weekend plans. "How does it feel?" her friend asked. "Being a millionaire?" Rebecca looked at Lily playing in the meadow beside the cabin, laughing as she chased butterflies. "I'm not a millionaire," Rebecca said softly. "I'm something better. I'm free." The cabin that the Ashfords had mocked as worthless had given her exactly what Vivian promised, not just financial security, but liberation from the family that had tried to define her worth. Sometimes the most valuable inheritances can't be measured in dollars. Sometimes they're measured in justice, dignity, and the courage to honor those who believed in you when no one else did.